welcome to First Chapter Friday. This Friday, we're going to be reading actually the first 5 chapters of We Were Liars by Lockhart. The chapters are only about a page and a half long at the start of this, which is pretty indicative of this book. It's a quick read. Some of you might even be able to finish it within one sitting. This book is known as a thriller. It's pretty suspenseful. We follow Cady, our narrator, throughout her summer where she's living on a private island with her family, who have a lot of secrets. So the title is very apropos because almost everybody in her family is lying about living this perfect life with a perfect family and a perfect house. They have a lot of secrets to be held, and Cady is actually trying to recover a memory. She knows that something bad has happened in the past, and she's trying to kind of uncover what's happened and what she and everybody else has been lying about. One of my favorite things is actually just from the inside front cover of this book, and it says, "If anyone asks you how it ends, just lie." And that's so true because this book has quite the twist of an ending. And I think that it'll kind of keep you hooked right until the very end, and then it'll surprise you. So many people have enjoyed this book. I have a few copies on my shelves. So if you would like to borrow it, let me know and I'd be happy to lend it to you. So let's read the first 5 chapters and see what you think.
We Were Liars by Lockhart. Chapter 1. Welcome to the beautiful Sinclair family. No one is a criminal. No one is an addict. No one is a failure. The Sinclairs are athletic, tall, and handsome. We are old money Democrats. Our smiles are wide, our chins square, and our tennis serves aggressive. It doesn't matter if divorce shreds the muscles of our hearts so that they will hardly beat without a struggle. It doesn't matter if trust fund money is running out, if credit card bills go unpaid on the kitchen counter. It doesn't matter if there's a cluster of pill bottles on the bedside table. It doesn't matter if one of us is desperately in love. So much in love that equally desperate measures must be taken. We are the Sinclairs. No one is needy. No one is wrong. We live, at least in the summertime, on a private island off the coast of Massachusetts. Perhaps that's all you need to know. Chapter 2. My full name is Cadence Sinclair Eastman. I live in Burlington, Vermont, with Mummy and 3 dogs. I'm nearly 18. I own a well-used library card and not much else, though it's true that I live in a grand house full of expensive, useless objects. I used to be blonde, but now my hair is black. I used to be strong, but now I am weak. I used to be pretty, but now I look sick. It is true I suffer migraines since my accident. It is true I do not suffer fools. I like a twist of meaning. You see, suffer migraines, do not suffer fools. The word means almost the same as it did in the previous sentence, but not quite. Suffer. You could say it means endure, but that's not exactly right. My story starts just before the accident. June of the summer I was 15, my father ran off with some woman he loved more than us. Dad was a middling, successful professor of military history. Back then, I adored him. He wore tweed jackets. He was gaunt. He drank milky tea. He was fond of board games and let me win, fond of boats and taught me to kayak, fond of bicycles, books, and art museums. He was never fond of dogs, and it was a sign of how much he loved my mother that he let golden retrievers sleep on the sofas and walked them 3 miles every morning. He was never fond of my grandparents either, and it was a sign of how much he loved both me and Mummy that he spent every summer in the Windmere House on Beechwood Island writing articles on wars fought long ago and putting on a smile for the relatives at every meal. That June, summer 15, Dad announced he was leaving and departed 2 days later. He told my mother he wasn't a Sinclair and he couldn't try to be one any longer. He couldn't smile, couldn't lie, couldn't be part of that beautiful family in those beautiful houses. Wouldn't. He had hired moving vans already. He had rented a house too. My father put a last suitcase into the backseat of the Mercedes. He was leaving Mummy with only the Saab and started the engine. Then he pulled out a handgun and shot me in the chest. I was standing on the lawn and I fell. The bullet hole opened wide and my heart rolled out of my rib cage and down onto a flower bed. Blood gushed rhythmically from my open wound, then from my eyes, my ears, my mouth. It tasted like salt and failure. The bright red shame of being unloved soaked the grass in front of our house, the bricks on the path, the steps to the porch. My heart spasmed among the peonies like a trout. Mommy snapped. She said to get a hold of myself. Be normal now, she said. Right now, she said. Because you are. Because you can be. Don't cause a scene, she told me. Breathe and sit up. I did what she asked. She was all I had left. Mommy and I tilted our square chins high as Dad drove down the hill. Then we went indoors and trashed the gifts he'd given us. Jewelry, clothes, books, anything. In the days that followed, we got rid of the couch and the armchairs that my parents had bought together, tossed the wedding china, the silver, the photographs. We purchased new furniture, hired a decorator, placed an order for Tiffany silverware, spent a day walking through art galleries and bought paintings to cover the empty spaces on our walls. We asked Granddad's lawyers to secure Mummy's assets. Then we packed our bags and we went to Beechwood Island. Chapter 3. Penny, Carrie, and Bess are the daughters of Tipper and Harris Sinclair. Harris came into his money at 21 after Harvard and grew the fortune doing business I never bothered to understand. He inherited houses and land. He made intelligent decisions about the stock market. He married Tipper and kept her in the kitchen and the garden. He put her on display in pearls and on sailboats. She seemed to enjoy it. Granddad's only failure was that he never had a son. But no matter. The Sinclair daughters were sunburnt and blessed. Tall, merry, and rich. Those girls were like princesses in a fairy tale. They were known throughout Boston, Harvard Yard, Martha's Vineyard for their cashmere cardigans and grand parties. They were made for legends, made for princes and Ivy League schools, ivory statues, and majestic houses. Granddad and Tipper loved the girls so they couldn't decide whom they loved best. First Carrie, then Penny, then Bess, then Carrie again. There were splashy weddings with salmon and harpists, and then bright blonde grandchildren and funny blonde dogs. No one could have ever been prouder of their beautiful American girls than Tipper and Harris were. Back then. They built 3 new houses on their craggy private island and gave them each a name. Windmere for Penny, Redgate for Carrie, and Cuddledown for Bess. I am the eldest Sinclair grandchild, heiress to the island, the fortune, and the expectations. Well, probably anyway. Chapter 4. Me, Johnny, Mirren, and Gat. Gat, Mirren, Johnny, and me. The family calls us for the liars. And probably we deserve it. We are all nearly the same age and we all have birthdays in the fall. Most years on the island, we've been trouble. Gat started coming to Beechwood the year we were 8, summer 8, we called it. Before that, Mirren, Johnny, and I weren't liars. We were nothing but cousins, and Johnny was a pain because he didn't like playing with girls. Johnny, he has bounce, effort, and snark. Back then, he would hang our babies by the necks and shoot us with guns made of Legos. Mirren is the sugar, curiosity, and rain. Back then, she spent long afternoons with Taft and the twins splashing at the big beach while I drew pictures on graph paper and read in the hammock on the Claremont house porch. Then Gat came to spend the summers with us. Aunt Carrie's husband left her when she was pregnant with Johnny's brother, Will. I don't know how that happened. The family never speaks of it. By summer 8, Will was a baby, and Carrie had taken up with Ed already. This Ed, he was an art dealer, and he adored the kids. That's all that we heard about him when Carrie announced she was bringing him to Beechwood along with Johnny and the baby. They were last to arrive that summer, and most of us were on the dock waiting for the boat to pull in. Granddad lifted me up so I could wave at Johnny, who was wearing an orange life vest and shouting over the prow. Granny Tipper stood next to us. She turned away from the boat for a moment, reached in her pocket, and she brought out a white peppermint, unwrapped it, and tucked it into my mouth. She looked back at the boat. Gran's face changed. I squinted to see what she saw. Carrie stepped off with Will on her hip. He was in a baby's yellow vest and was really no more than a shock of the white blonde hair sticking up over it. A cheer went up at the sight of him. That vest, which we had all worn as babies, the hair, how wonderful it was that this little boy we didn't know yet was so obviously a Sinclair. Johnny leapt off the boat and he threw his own vest on the dock. First thing, he ran up to Mirren and kicked her. Then he kicked me, kicked the twins, walked over to our grandparents and stood up straight. Good to see you, Granny and Granddad. Look forward to a happy summer. Tipper hugged him. Your mother told you to say that, didn't she? Yeah, said Johnny. And I'm to say nice to see you again. Good boy. Can I go now? Tipper kissed his freckled cheek. Go on then. Ed followed Johnny, having stopped to help the staff unload the luggage from the motorboat. He was tall and slim. His skin was very dark, Indian heritage, we'd later learn. He wore black frame glasses and he was dressed in dapper city clothes, a linen suit and a striped shirt. The pants were wrinkled from traveling. Granddad set me down. Granny Tipper's mouth made a straight line and then she showed all of her teeth and went forward. You must be Ed. What a lovely surprise. He shook hands. Didn't Carrie tell you we were coming? Of course she did. Ed looked around at our white family, turned to Carrie. Where's Gat? They called for him, and he climbed from the inside of the boat, taking off his life vest, looking down to undo the buckles. Mother, Dad, said Carrie, we brought Ed's nephew to play with Johnny. This is Gat Patil. Granddad reached out and patted Gat's head. Hello, young man. Hello. His father passed on just this year, explained Carrie. He and Johnny are the best of friends, and it's a big help to Ed's sister if we take him for a few weeks. And Gat, you'll get to have cookouts and go swimming like we talked about, okay? But Gat didn't answer. He was looking at me. His nose was dramatic. His mouth was sweet, skin deep brown, his hair black and waving, body wired with energy. Gat seemed spring-loaded, like he was searching for something. He was contemplation and enthusiasm, ambition and strong coffee. I could have looked at him forever. Our eyes locked. I turned and ran away. Gat followed. I could hear his feet behind me on the wooden walkways that crossed the island. I kept running. He kept following. Johnny chased Gat, and Mirren chased Johnny. The adults remained talking on the dock, circling politely around Ed, cooing over baby Will. The littles did whatever littles do. We four stopped running at the tiny beach down by Cuddle Down House. It's a small stretch of sand with high rocks on either side. No one used it much back then. The big beach had softer sand and less seaweed. Mirren took off her shoes and the rest of us followed. We tossed stones into the water. We just existed. I wrote our names in the sand. Cadence, Mirren, Johnny, and Gat. Gat, Johnny, Mirren, and Cadence. That was the beginning for us. Johnny begged to have Gat stay longer, and he got what he wanted. The next year, he begged to have him come for the entire summer. Gat came. Johnny was the first grandson. My grandparents almost never said no to Johnny. Chapter 5. Summer 14. Gat and I took out a small motorboat alone, and it was just after breakfast. Bess made Mirren play tennis with the twins and Taft. Johnny had started running that year, so he was doing loops around the perimeter path. Gat found me in the Claremont kitchen and asked, did I want to take the boat out? Not really. I wanted to go back to bed with a book. Please. Gat almost never said please. Take it out yourself. I can't borrow it, he said. I don't feel right. Of course you can borrow it. Not without you. He was being ridiculous. Where do you want to go? I asked. I just want to get off the island. Sometimes I can't stand it here. I couldn't imagine then what it was he couldn't stand, but I said all right. We motored out to sea in wind jackets and bathing suits. After a bit, Gat cut the engine, and we sat eating pistachios and breathing salt air. The sunlight shone on the water. Let's go in, I said. Gat jumped and I followed, but the water was so much colder than off the beach it snatched our breath. The sun went behind a cloud, and we laughed panicky laughs and shouted that it was the stupidest idea to get in the water. What would we been thinking? There were sharks off the coast. Everybody knew that. Don't talk about sharks. God! We scrambled and pushed each other, struggling to be the first one up the ladder of the back of the boat. After a minute, Gat leaned back and let me go first. Not because you're a girl, but because I'm a good person, he told me. Thanks, I stuck out my tongue. But when a shark bites my legs off, promise to write a speech how awesome I was. Done, I said. Gatwick Matthew Patil made a delicious meal. It seemed hysterically funny to be so cold. We didn't have towels. We huddled together under a fleece blanket we found under the seats, our bare shoulders touching each other, cold feet on top of one another. This is only so we don't get hypothermia, said Gat. Don't think I find you pretty or anything. I know you don't. You're hogging the blanket. Sorry, a pause. Gat said, I do find you pretty, Cady. I didn't mean that the way it came out. In fact, when did you get pretty? It's distracting. I look the same as always. You changed over the school year. It's putting me off my game. You have game? He nodded solemnly. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. What's your game? Nothing penetrates my armor. Hadn't you noticed? That made me laugh. No. Damn, I thought it was working. We changed the subject and talked about bringing the littles to Edgartown and see a movie that afternoon about sharks and whether they really ate people, and then about plants versus zombies. We drove back to the island. Not long after that, Gat started lending me his books and finding me at the tiny beach in the early evenings. He'd searched me out when I was lying on the windmere lawn with the Goldens. We started walking together on the path that circles the island. Gat in front and me behind. We'd talk about books or invent imaginary worlds. Sometimes we end up walking several times around the edge before we got hungry or bored. Beach roses lined the path, deep pink. Their smell was faint and sweet. One day I looked at Gat, lying in the Claremont hammock with a book, and he seemed, well, like he was mine. Like he was my particular person. I got in the hammock next to him, and silently I took the pen out of his hand. He always read with a pen. He wrote Gat on the back to his left and Cadence on the back of his right. And he took the pen from me and wrote Gat on the back of my left and Cadence on the back of my right. I'm not talking about fate. I don't believe in destiny or soulmates or the supernatural. I just mean we understood each other all the way. But we were only 14. I had never kissed a boy, though I'd kiss a few the next school year, and somehow we just didn't label it love.